Hello friends and welcome to another video. Today we're going to learn a bit about HTML. Um, I have my VS Code, a code editor open. And that's because we need a code editor, of course. And if you use any code editor would work. And in fact, I pulled up VS Code download site if you want to download it, and I would recommend it, download it because we're going to use it a lot. But if you don't want, if you just want to practice, uh, I didn't know about this myself. Let me maximize this. Actually, let me just copy it and open it in this one. So I have these files, this Windows open, but it's not important. So you see, this one is actually it's vscode.dev. It's an environment online. You don't have to install it. I didn't know about this myself. So I just learned about this. And if you want to test it out, you can test it, of course. I personally never worked with this one, which is in the Explorer, so I don't know if the extensions and every other aspect of it would work. But as you can see here, I have my VS Code open. So what we want to do, we want to just, I want to cover some very basic HTML. That's it. Okay, so nothing else, nothing CSS, nothing JS. Those will come later. So I also have some websites open. We're not going to use it in this one, but W3 Schools in particular is a very, very, very good website. And I, I I'm not affiliated or anything. I just like this website and they are very good. So we can use this as a reference. And this is a great website. You can learn a lot of frameworks and languages from this website. Let's jump back to our VS Code. So we're going to learn HTML and I'm going to explain on the, as we code and on the job, basically. I also have some extensions on my VS Code. So if you open VS Code for the first time, you have this file, these icons on the left. The first one is File Explorer, which if you open a website, open a folder on, create a new folder on your desktop, and then you go to File, you can open the folder in here. That's what I have here, Simple Site. I called it Simple Site. There is nothing in it. And then we go to the extensions. We don't need any extension for this one except this live server. So if you search live server up here, it'll pop up and install it. This is a cool extension that will give us a local host or server so we can run our website easily on the browser. So I'm gonna make this maybe a bit bigger. Okay. So let's just start with a bit of introduction. First thing we want to do, create a file here. So I'm gonna create a new file, call it index.html. I'm calling it index because that's a convention, and browsers look for the index.html as their home page, as their first page uh, by default. So that's why I call it index.html, and it is HTML because we are going to work with HTML. It could be PHP, but we're not there yet. So let me just get the boilerplate out here, and you can get the boilerplate of the HTML by adding one exclamation mark in VS Code, and this will help us, the EMET abbreviation, to get that boilerplate, and I will explain all of this. Okay, so we're gonna go through these elements one by one and see what they are. So first, let's talk about HTML. What is HTML? HTML, it stands for hypertext markup language. That's it, language. Did I write that correctly? Yeah. And the live server we extend here comes in and we can use it. And when you install the live server extensions, remember from here, uh, on your HTML page, you should have this Go Live button at the bottom of VS Code. And if you press on it, it should open a browser. There it is, a browser page for you, and it says, it's a local server index.html, and that's what live server does. So if I and the good part of it is, if I make any changes and save the document, it will pop up there. So I'm gonna zoom in here just so we can see. All right. So again, we're covering very basics for now. HTML, hypertext markup language, and that's the language of web pages. So before, and it is, it's just HTML. It doesn't look good. It doesn't have any functionality at first. It is just HTML. So what does HTML do? You can think of it as the structure of every web page. It is the structure of every web page. So imagine that you're building a house and you have, like the foundation, the walls, the columns, and so on. So this HTML does the same thing. So imagine on a website like this one, you have all these structure. For example, this is a navigation bar. This is the section of, the introduction section. This is, I don't know, what is like suggestions or quotes from other people section. And some services, some info, and so on, download section. So these are all sections. And in fact, if we delete the CSS from this website, we will be returned to the bare HTML. So let's do it. On any website, click and inspect it. So if you run Chrome, you can just right click and inspect. And I think most browsers are the same. I'm going to close this one. And if we go to, so we get you can see we get these elements on the left, and we get the styles. We don't need any of these now because we're just going to look at this. And I will explain all of this. If we go to the head, like we have here, and we should be able to find on any website a link element that says a style sheet, at least one. So sometimes there's two like this. Now let's delete these by pressing delete key on our keyboard. Bam. Look at that. I ruined the website. There's another one. Let me delete that one too. Bam. And you can see here now I'm back all the way to the HTML code. There's no style. There's no, there's nothing really. There's just some images. But that's it really. It doesn't look good at all. So, but that is the structure. If this structure wasn't there, this website wouldn't work with CSS alone. So it is very important we learn the basics of HTML, even though it's very, very easy. So next step is what are these things on the, when we see. So like I said, every page has a structure. It's like the foundation of a house. And then within that, we have the elements. So these are called elements. So HTML element that starts there and ends here. Head element starts up there, ends out down here, and body, and so on. So some elements start with an opening tag and close with a closing tag, or end with a closing tag. And you can tell this is a closing tag by this slash behind the tag name. So this is called a tag, and this whole thing called an element. Within it, we have nested elements, and it could be a lot of nested elements within each other. So some elements, however, don't have a closing tag. They are just one element like this, and then they accept attributes. So we have the element tag name, and then we have attributes like this. Lang, short for language, is the attribute, and then attributes have values. All right, so like this meta right down here, this is a meta tag, and it has two attributes. It can have a lot of attributes, and then the attributes have values. Sometimes the values are more than one, so and they are separated by comma. Okay, so far so good. And again, we learn as we develop websites, we learn more and more about these things. This is just an introduction. Let's talk about these, what they are and what they do. Doc type, as the name suggests, is the document type. It says, what kind of a document is this? It tells the browser it is an HTML5 document. right? And again, if we inspect any website, the very first line is that doc type HTML. It just tells the document this is an HTML, because sometimes it's an XML, sometimes it's HTML4, for example, but usually it's just HTML5. We are already in that era of HTML5. Then we get the HTML tag or element, the HTML itself. This is the root of every HTML website. This has to be the root, and then everything goes within it. Also, some side note here, you can see all these tags, even though they are nested, it's kind of like they should be a bit, they can come forward so we can see this is nested inside HTML, and we can just right click and say format, and it will format it for us. Now, I have another extension that is called Prettier. This is not a necessary extension, but if you install it, and I again search for Prettier, if you install it and go here, if you're using it for the first time, something like this will pop up and says, okay, which one do you want to use? You want to use the default HTML, or do you want to use the Prettier? So I chose Prettier. If you choose HTML, this will go back to that, kind of pushing back these things. I I like this Prettier because it is clearer. Yeah. Anywho, that's just formatting. It doesn't do anything regarding the programming and coding. So HTML, remember, is the root of HTML page, and it has some attributes. For example, the language. The language attribute defines, like VS Code tells us, helps to define the language of an element. So we are telling the HTML page we are working on, it's English. It's going to be English by default. And that's why we have this tag en. So this is another cool feature of VS Code. If you hover over every name, it will tell you what it is, and you can even get a further information from MDN reference. That is I think it is Mozilla Developer Network, I think, but it'll take us to that website. Next is head and body. So think of it, the best way I would say, think of it as a human body, and we have a head, right? We have a head as well as, let me format this again, I messed it up. We have a head and a body. Our head, our brain tells us what the body should do, right? And people cannot see it. We cannot see inside someone's brain or what's going on in their head, yet we can see their actions and we can hear their words, their voice, right? So that's what head does. Anything that goes into the head, and if we inspect this site again, anything that goes inside a head element tells the website how to behave and how to, look for the body or for the viewer, the user. And you can see here we have in the head a lot of meta tags, we have links, we have scripts. All of this we will learn about it, but we don't see it here up on the screen. But much like the style sheet which we deleted before, if we delete it, it will ruin the website. But so we can see they are telling the website how to look. So that's the head. Again, like a human head, it tells how a website should behave. A body, as the name suggests, just says whatever that needs to be shown on the screen, on the page. So for example, if we, what? Sorry, my keyword didn't work, I think. Oh, okay. So if I say, I'm sorry, I'm going to cut this text, add an h1 element, I will explain in a second, and then put that back in. It, you see, it got bigger, and don't forget I am zoomed in, so it should be different in your computer if you are not zoomed in. So, but whatever I put in here, right, it will just show up on the screen. And as I am saving it and it just pops up, it's because I'm using live server again. So the extension live server. So now let's talk about these elements. I mean, some of the body elements that we will use a lot. So again, whatever we put in the body, it'll show up on the screen. And by default, we have a lot of elements in HTML. We have a lot. And again, we can use W3 school reference or even learning it and see all these elements. You can see tags and see, ooh, all of them, they do, all of these elements do something specific. You can see here. Now, let me go back here. Um, you know, the one thing we have to learn from the beginning, I really recommend that I wish I had learned from the beginning myself, is to consider the accessibility and, the accessibility of a website. Yeah, let me put it that way. It is not a very, you know, many people, it might not be, I mean, for me, for example, I never use the accessibility features because I don't need it. But there are many people that they actually need accessibility features like screen readers, like high contrast colors, and so on. Those are just to help a viewer or user with some, you know, disadvantages to view that website better. But the way we use it, these elements, is actually important. So before actually we jump into the elements, you noticed I used an H1 element and a P element, but they look different because by default, every browser has some styles, default styles. And you can see, for example, if I click, choosing this, and click on this element, it tells me that this is my H1, and it tells me it has the font size of 2 rem, it has margin, yada yada yada. These are CSS we will learn later, but it has default uh, look. That's why it looks that way, or even the font. We can change all of that with CSS, but in this course, which is just HTML. So let's go through some of the most common elements in HTML. So the first one is heading tags. That H1, if we hover over it, it tells us the H1 element represents a section heading. So these are heading tags, and we have 6 of them. So one is H1, one is H2, and it goes down all the way through H6. So H3, and you can see the VS Code again tells us when we press H, H6. And I'm going to copy paste this text and I just put it in every tag. Control V, oops, cancel, sorry. Control V, Control V. And I think it's clear what it does. It is just making it smaller for subsections or subheadings. So you have one big heading for your website, which we usually use one, usually use one H1 on the website because that's your main heading. And then for the sections, we use subheadings like H2 or so on. And if you have an article, for example, you use different sections, different headings. So let's leave those in there. And for example, now we have a paragraph under our heading 2. Okay, so this one. Maybe I should just write what they are. It doesn't matter. For example, I can say I have a paragraph and the tag is P, short for paragraph. And if I just press P and click on it or just enter or tap on my keyboard, this will give me the opening and closing tag. Now, whatever I can type here. So a cool trick on in VS Code, you can type lorem and press, again, click on it. This will give you one paragraph of dummy text. So this is one paragraph of dummy text. So it's very convenient way if you want ever, if you sometimes you just want some dummy text for your website to see how it looks. You just type lorem and it will give you one paragraph. You can also provide a number here, say 20. This will give me 20 words. So if you provide a number, you're telling how many words do you want. If I say 200 and press tab or enter or click this 200 words, there you go. So this is a paragraph. This is too long. I'm going to make it a bit shorter, just like that. Delete it. Now, so this is another very common tag we use. The other one is link, and it is A. The tag name is A. And by default, when you click the A link, it will give you an attribute called href. Let me delete it for a moment because I want to start from the plain A. So let's say this is a link. All right. And let me hover over this. It says if the A element has an href attribute, the one that we deleted, then it represents a hyperlink or a hypertext anchor labeled by its content. So this is content. Anything that goes between the two tags, so opening closing tag, it's called the content. So this is a link, and we expect it to be a link. Like here, these are all links here. You can see the mouse cursor changes, as well as, you can tell by the underline or some effects. These are done by CSS, of course. Now, I'm going to close that one. However, our link doesn't do anything. You can't really say the difference, right? Because it's the same as paragraph and the h1, h2, and the link. That's why that href is important, and that's why VS Code tells us if that href attribute is there, then it's a link. And I'm not providing anything, so I have the attribute with no value. So when I save it, you can see it's already changed to an underline with some color on it, and the color is purple because we're on the same page and we are already in it, so it shows us that it has been visited. Now, if I, for example, add another website, say YouTube, as if I save this should turn to blue, right? Yeah, because we have not visited this link, and if we do it, this turns to purple saying you've already visited. So but you can see now it's already a link. So this is a hyperlink taking us to that website. This could be an external website just like this YouTube, or it could be, another link to our website. So instead of going out, it will go to another section. And I will explain this later on, don't worry about it. But imagine we have an about section on the same page. We just say hashtag about or #, and we can address that by giving ID to elements. I'm going too fast, so just forget this part for now. But let's say I want to go to this VS Code instead of YouTube, because I don't want to go to YouTube. Okay. I'm just going to call it VS. So by default, when you click on a link, this will take you to the website, of course. But look what happened. It closed my website. And imagine now I'm clicking on this website 50 times, going into this link and that link. Now I already lost my page. This is not a good practice, because you are kind of kicking the user out of your website. This is not a good practice. So if you have an external link on your web page, always provide the attribute target. This, what it does, it tells you where should this website open, and you want to say open it in a blank page, and it could be a tab or a page. That is not our concern. The concern is that don't close our website. Now you want to open it in a blank window or tab or another, I don't know, workspace. That's just up to the browser and the operating system of the user. So now I click on this VS Code, bam. It doesn't close it, so the user easily can come back to the website. So always for the internal links, you don't need the target, because the user is navigating through your website, so you don't need the target for them. So that's it. Now let's say what other things. So on every website we have a menu, of course, right? Like this one. So we have a navigation bar, and the tag for it is nav for short, navigation. And of course, whatever we put in here, it will be considered as the navigation. Now again, let me add these two links instead of in the middle of the page, add it up here. So it's kind of like a menu, imagine. Again, this looks ugly because we have no CSS. But here it is. Here's the thing. If I put these right underneath, okay, and I'm going to format it again, format document. So look at the body of our web page, okay? Forget this part for a second. Look at this. Imagine you're a user on this website, and this is a website you want to use. Now, what's the difference between this and this? From your view, from the user view, nothing. Just repeating the same thing. However, for the screen reader, it's different because now the screen reader knows this is the navigation, the menu, and these are just some links. Okay, and that's why I said it before, that using the right tag for the right section for the right purpose, it is very important. I could even, for example, this H1 element, it's an H1 element, it's a heading. So a screen reader goes down and says, for example, heading 1, da 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 da, read the content, right? Now, I could easily make this A element, right? It turns like that, but with some styling, I give it the attribute of style, and I put the font size 3 rem. Okay, it's coming back to what it was. I want to give the display. These are CSS, so don't worry about the display block. Oops, what? Wait, why did I go outside? Just a second. Block and okay, so it kind of look the same as the heading right now, doesn't it? So, but the screen reader goes down and says link or says link element and reads the content, even though this is not a link, this is supposed to be an H1. So that's what I just wanted to show you. Why is it important to use right element for the right job? Let's go back to the tags and the most important ones. Um, let's see. I'm going to delete these two. We don't need it. Another very, very useful and common element we use is called div, D-I-V. Let's hover over it, see what it says. I'm going to make some space here. See, it says the div element has no special meaning at all. It represents its children. That's it, really. Div it doesn't have a special meaning, like it said. It is just an element that group things together. So right now, I have this and this and this. These are all separate elements. They are not in a group, of course. Yet, if I change this div all the way down here, the closing tag, and format my document, you see, they're all inside the div. So this is all one group. Now, if I say, for example, change the style to the color of all these text should be red, bam. So this represents all its children. And it's a very, very useful element to group things, to, separate them, to give them sections, give them, special styles, CSS styles. And we will use this a lot. However, again, we don't need to, and we shouldn't overuse this one. For example, imagine again, I have an article and it contains headings and subheadings and sections. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Now, instead of saying the div, we have to use this other tag called section. And again, section is very clear what it does. The section element represents a generic section of a document or application. So this is again another good practice. Instead of saying this is just a div, because a screen reader doesn't know what's a div. It doesn't have a meaning, remember? But section has a meaning. It's a section. So instead of using a div for an article, we can easily just, and it is recommended to use a section. And in fact, let's say there's, like I said, there are lots of elements for different purpose. And you can see here again in the W3 schools reference, all of them are there. So let's say this is not even a section, this is an article. So section could be anything. We have even an article element. So we can just use that one. So I'm going to move this closing tag down here. Bam. Nothing really shows here, but again, for the screen reader, it goes down and says article, heading, paragraph, and so on. So these are very important for the screen readers. Cool, cool, cool. All right, what's next? Oh, that's the article. Those are the heads and so on. The other one is image, of course. Let's say our article has an image right underneath our H1, H3 element. So the tag for it is img. And if we click on it, by default, this will give us two attributes. One is the source src, and the source says, where is this image? So it expects the value of the source of the image. Where is it coming from? Okay, we will cover that in a second. The alt represents the alternative text in case the image doesn't exist or fails to load. Okay, so it fails to show. And I will show you what happens if we don't use it. And again, this is very important for screen readers. And there are other attributes we will use in a second. Now, image could be from the local source. So imagine I have an image right here. I don't have it right now. But I can say, for example, the same folder by / for example, logo.png. I don't have any, but you can use it. So let me actually bring an image. Okay, so I copied an image into my folder. This is just my logo, my channel's logo. And by the way, since I'm here, I appreciate if you like and subscribe because I'm very new and I need your support. Thanks. Okay, let's go back here. So again, I can say the image is in the same folder as my index file. So so I give the directory address to it, logo.png. And if I save it, look what happens. Bam. It ruins my website because the image is so big. So I'm scrolling around. So a very good attribute and a necessary one is the width attribute in image when we are working with image. And it's clear what it does. It gives us the intrinsic width of the image in pixels. So we want to say, for example, the max amount should be 300 pixels. That's it. So maybe that one even is too big. So just make it 100. Yeah, there we go. So now we can, of course, style this with CSS, but sometimes, again, you have to consider all the scenarios or most of it. Sometimes the CSS fails to load. And if it does that, the browser jumps back to the attributes and see where is this image width. So if we don't provide it, it will become super big and it will break our website. Now, this is the alt image, right? Right now I have no alt, right? But we do know there is an image here. Now let's say we make a mistake. The logo is deleted or the image's name is changed or whatever. So I'm just going to put one after it and save it. The image is gone, of course, because there is no such thing. There is no such an image. But also the whole attribute is gone. Everything is gone. So there's no way we know there is an image here. Now, it could be a link, that image, much like VS Code. Again, you see, this is kind of a big button, but these are all images, but you can click on it. So this is a link as well as an image. So if the image is gone, there is no link, and that's a bad design. That's why we need to say, for example, this is site logo, a descriptive alternative text that says what it is. This is here. And if I save it, because the image doesn't load, but it gives me the alternative text. So at least now I know there was an image here, but for some reason it's not loading, and I can click on it if it was a link. So let's go back. And again, this could be an external image. So imagine, for example, we are getting the image from here. So if I copy image address from this site and just paste it here, it expects a URL. And bam, there we go. We got the image. But I don't want the image. I want my own logo, of course. So that's image, another very useful element. And keep in mind, all these elements have a lot of attributes that we can use, such as style that we used before. And for example, ID attribute, look, we can see here, it defines a unique identifier, which must be unique in the whole document. So And it's very useful when we go and work with JavaScript, because when we want to target this element, we cannot just say P, because there is another P. Which one are we talking about, right? So the ID, as it said, it's a unique identifier, and I can say, give me the element with the ID of something, for example. Or the other one is class. It's a very useful and very common used uh, attribute, which tells the classes what classes this element should have. And classes are defined within the CSS. For example, I want to say this is, I don't know, article, and then I will add my article class in my CSS styles, which again, we're not working with CSS right now. Now, so remember before we talked about this pound element and about. So imagine this section, this article right here is the about article. It talks about our website. And what we can do, we can say the ID, which we talked about, is a unique identifier. Now the ID expects a name, right? And we can call it the same about, because it's about, this is the about article. So now if I click, let me actually change this about us, like a real menu. Now this is not too far, so we don't see what happens. But look at the URL up there. If I click on this, it appends this hashtag about, which means I'm in this section. I am going to, for the sake of showing you, I'm going to give this the style again of margin top. Again, this is CSS. I'm telling, for example, add, I don't know, a 10 rem. These are units in CSS. Add 10 rem space, or a lot of space on top of this article, and if I save it, it pushes it down. I need more. I want it to be outside of the this what we see on the screen, so I'm going to give it 30. Okay, right now we don't see the about section, right? So you're on the website, the people you're working, and you want to see, okay, about us, click, bam. You're not outside your website, you just jumped down, and you can see it. In fact, you just scrolled down, and it was very snappy, but we can fix that with CSS later. For now, we're not working with CSS, but again, about us, and you can see it's appended up there. And this is again, it's a one way to jump around. However, if you refresh your website and this is up there, it will jump back down. So you see, if I'm up here and I'm refreshing the page, yeah, it doesn't go up there. Sometimes it does, sorry. Sometimes it does that, but it's fine. And it does that. So it just shows what section we're on. That's it. Okay, what else? The other element that we use, and again, it's a very helpful element for screen readers, is called main. Oh, sorry, main. And let's see what does this one say? The main element represents the main content. I mean, again, the name is very clear, of the body of a document or application. So remember, we said body represents everything that is viewable or visible to the user. However, main says the main section, or again, the main element represents the main content. So for example, we have the nav. Nav is not part of the main content of our element, because the main content, for example, when you open VS Code, this right here is the main content, because these are kind of the side contents. You're not really interested in these at first. If you want to know more, then that's another. But the main content is this part here, sometimes referred to it as the hero section. So sometimes we go ahead, I mean, for example, we add a section and then we call this with a class of hero. That means it's just the one, it is the section that the user sees first, and it's the most prominent of every web page. So yeah, that's main. So we can put, for example, the main article, the main heading, and the main picture, and this again, the hero section in the main, and then we go down from there. Let's go back to reference to see what else is out there. And again, you can see there are a lot of elements. For example, let me go back here. When you're writing an article, this is again, this is like when there was no CSS. You could say when you are referencing somebody's, for example, book or something, there was an I, there is an I element. So whatever we can say here, article 39, 34, for example. Did I write that correctly? Article, yeah. So you see this I right there, it's italic. And it says what? So the I element represents a span of a text in an alternate voice of mood. Okay, so basically like, again, somebody's talking. I mean, these are all about grammar, I would say, how it shows. Anyway, but it said, it's a good point here. It said span. So that's another useful element. It's called span. And what it does, you see, it doesn't mean anything on its own, but it can be useful when used together with the global attributes, class, language, or their directory. Now, for example, imagine this, you have this one, but um, you want more, I don't know, what's the word, customization. You want more uh, things to be able to control this. Let's say I want to put this, I don't know, YouTube. I can't think of anything. Now, it doesn't, you can't see any difference here in terms of how it looks, but because it's within its own tag, you can actually say style it and say, for example, font weight, which says it's, I want it to be bolder, for example. You can see up there. There is actually an element, for example, there is an element called strong. And if I say anything within these, it will be the same as providing this tag. But this span, again, it gives you a lot more. You can do a lot of things with this. And keep in mind, again, we don't use, I mean, I personally don't use these tags at all. Because again, nowadays you can do it with CSS, but it is important for the screen reader. Again, a screen reader cannot read CSS. All right. So the difference between this and this is the for screen reader. A screen reader comes out and says, for example, because again, a span doesn't mean anything. So it goes right over it and says, yada, 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 YouTube. But here comes along and says, for example, error, strong or bold, YouTube. So it refers, it reads these tags. So that's why it's important. Again, we need to keep accessibility in our mind when we're designing a website, especially these days. It's very important. So that's another tag, a strong span. Span, you can add a lot of things to span. And we use this usually with CSS and JavaScript when we want to do some cool stuff. You know, for example, you click on a menu and something else adds to the right of it, or it says open, for example. That could be done with span. So a lot can be done. So there are a lot of ways. And what else we got? Some of the most common used. You see, like these things we almost never use. Okay, so let me go back here. The other thing we use commonly in the navigation is, I'm just going to use it in main for now, but it could be used anywhere. It's an unordered list, UL, or ordered list. And it's very clear what it does. The UL element represents a list of items where the order of the item is not important. This one, intentionally ordered. So, and within these, we have another element that says what's list item. So li. So within the list, order list, we have list items. So we say item 1, item 2, item 3. And if you're curious, I used Shift Alt arrow down to copy paste down and Windows. It doesn't work on Linux. I have Linux, but it doesn't work there. We will use Linux when we get into real production because Windows is not good for production. I would not recommend using Windows for development. Yep. All right. So you see here, by default, the UL element has these dots, but because the order doesn't matter. However, in here, so if I move this here, I'm holding Alt on my keyboard and arrow up. So it's the text, the content says 213, right? But here says 1, 1, 2, 3 because this is ordered and it's important how we use it. So again, it's up to us what we put in there, but HTML knows this is an ordered list. That's why it's giving us numbers. Okay, so that's another one, UL and OL. The other one is table. It's a good element, I would say. It's a bit confusing though. I used the table before, and it has its own, attributes. It's kind of too confusing, but you have table, and it's like imagine as a like a style sheet, not a style sheet, a spreadsheet with Excel or something, and you have the table. Okay, then you have table head. I'm sorry, table body, table head. Okay, let me start with that one. Table head, and if it says the element represents the header cell in the table. And then again, there's a lot we can go inside and says table row, I think. Yeah, row of the cell. And then we have table body, which again, it has its own rows. So these are head. Oops. So head, body. And you can see it goes alongside each other, and again it has to have some styles. Let's go to W3 schools and let's find table. So, and you can see all of this actually they are very helpful, and we can use them like small. It's very, I mean, it's clear what it does. It makes the text smaller. Let's use it. I'm kind of jumping around here because we're just covering some. Why am I putting it up down there? I'm just gonna put it up here. Da 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 da. Bam. It's small. That's it. Nothing's too fancy. So I was gonna use the table if I can find it. I don't see very good table. Oh, okay. So I had to use it that way. So you see, even I'm not, because I don't use this not much. Even sometimes, almost never. So I'm gonna copy paste that table from W3 school, and let me format my document. So you see we have table, and see how it looks. So so I made a mistake going the other way around. So we had the table and we have table rows. Now inside a row, we are saying this is a table heading, this is a table heading, and these are representing the columns, right? And these are table data. See, data cell. So we have another row and we could go on and on and on, and we can have heads. The good thing about table is that it's organized. So if I put this and add text, like short and long texts, right? So if I do this, and for example, again, long, maybe I want to do this. Okay, so you can see it actually aligns it on the left side, right? It depends what it is. It's a number or it's a, so it has its own default styles again. But it's a cool way if you have a lot of data you want to show on your screen, you can use table, which is a very cool. Yep. And I think that's it for now, guys. So again, we have a lot of HTML tags which we will learn on the job. We don't need to go through them one by one. So sorry, let me go back here. All I want to say that this is HTML, and again, it's very simple. There's nothing so special about it, and we will learn a lot more if we actually design a website and get in with CSS and HTML, JavaScript, sorry. And I just want to say we will spend a lot more time on CSS and HTML than HTML, because you can get the foundation structure of your website in few minutes or an hour, for example. depending on how big this website is. But then again, everything else is done with CSS and HTML, especially if your website is getting data from an external server or source. So those are all HTML. I'm sorry, JavaScript. So for now, guys, I'm going to end this video here. So this was the introduction to the basic HTML. And I hope this has been helpful. And again, don't worry about these. We will learn all about it. The title, for example, it's up there, document, it says it's very clear. We will learn about all of this on the job. And I just want to thank you for watching. And please do not forget to like and subscribe. I'll catch you all at the next video. Bye bye.